Good afternoon, Dr. Stein.
Hi.
I think where we left off, I was talking to you about the dog and the interview you had with Detective Donahue regarding that dog, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw the questions having to do with that tape. I'm going to move on, okay?
Okay.
Now, you did go online to try to find pictures of dogs similar to Penny, right? Penny is the dog that April had. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yes. Yes, I think I was looking at, yeah.
Okay, and who did you supply those photographs to, if anybody?
I don't think I supplied them to anyone.
Okay, and you did tell Detective Donahue that you had went online to try to find some pictures that looked like the dog that April had. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay. Now, if you know, did your husband also do that regarding the motorcycles?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Same thing. He went online and tried to look for pictures, correct?
Yes.
Would you have any reason to dispute that 12 miles per hour is about 17 feet per second, the movement?
I don't have a reason to dispute it. I haven't done the calculation.
Just so you know, I'm not scientifically, orientated myself, so I'm not saying that that necessarily is, but that's the quotation I get. Do you know how many times your husband called the police? I know you said you had called several times, but how many times did your husband call the police and or different law enforcement authorities, including tip lines?
I don't know.
If you know, okay. When you were riding 12 miles an hour on a bike, do you normally lean forward or do you stay upright?
I'm upright.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Upright?
I tend to ride more upright rather than leaning forward.
Okay. And I think you indicated your sunglasses are not prescription, right?
They are
They are
prescription.
prescription. Okay. Are they bifocals?
No.
They're all the same?
Yes, I have them here if anyone wants them.
Oh, well, that's fine. Now, I know you said a couple of different things about the kind of pants that the person was wearing. What is your recollection today of what color pants the person was wearing?
I just remember like darker pants, so I was thinking jeans. That's all I don't know for sure.
Like blue jeans?
Yes, I don't know for sure.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further. Sorry if I seemed rude. I didn't mean to be. I just had to ask some questions, okay?
Thank you.
Good luck, ma'am. Thank you.
Those glasses would give me more hair, wouldn't they? I have no further questions, Your Honor. I would proceed to bring our next witness out. We'll be done this time.
Thank you, may be excused. The next witness. Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
And what is your name?
Douglas Stein.
Thank you, sir. Speak loudly.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
May May I simply call you Doug?
Yes, please.
How old are you, Doug?
57.
Let's get to the fun part of this. How are you employed?
I'm an engineering manager or director for a car supply company.
Okay. In the automotive industry?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
How long have you been an engineer?
I've been in my current position for 23 years as an engineer.
I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up a little bit.
All right.
Where others that have been in this case have testified before. This is your first time out here, so just to give you some of the rules, we have some ambient microphones that attempt to pick up the sound. That one small one right next to you actually does amplify also. So when I have you moving around a little bit, keep your voice up so that at all times the jurors can hear and that we can pick up the sound through the microphone.
Okay.
I will, the jury understands that Mary Stein that was in here is your wife?
That's correct.
Okay, so we can get through a lot of that stuff and just simply get right to some of the more basics. Do you ride the Macomb Orchard Trail on a regular basis?
Not so much anymore, but we did back a couple of years ago.
Back in 2014, that summer up to July 24th, had you ridden that trail?
Yes, quite a bit.
Did you ride it, I guess, the summer before that and the summer before that also?
Maybe the summer before, but not too many years before. We just discovered the trail just around 2013-14 time frame.
How many times do you think you were on the trail up to July 24th of 2014?
Probably, I would guess, maybe 10 times.
Had you ever seen a motorcycle on that trail?
Never.
Had you ever seen an ATV or any type of motorized vehicle on that trail?
We saw a couple police running down going down the trail in four-wheel ATVs one time as it was closing, just to do a rundown to check it out.
And that's the only time you've seen a motorized vehicle on that
Yes.
trail? When you ride the trail, do you have a sport app or an app tracker?
Yes.
What's the title of the one that you have?
DigiFit is the one I've been using.
How long have you had that one?
About two or 3 years.
Did you have that on July 24th of 2014?
I did.
What information does that app monitor?
I put it on my cell phone and it gives me my speed and distance, and we generally use that to know how far we've gone, when we want to turn around, if we're targeting a certain number of miles or something.
The app itself, you indicate, is a software application then to your cell phone?
Correct.
The odometer that your wife was talking about when she testified, is that physically attached to her bike?
Yes.
I want to take you to July 24th of 2014. Did you go to work that day?
Yes.
About what time did you get home?
I think around 5 o'clock.
And my understanding is you live in the city as a township of Leonard?
Correct.
What was the weather like that day?
I don't remember precisely, but it was calm and warm enough to go out for a nice bike ride in the evening. I don't remember so much about clouds.
Did you go on a bike ride that evening?
Yes.
Where did you enter the Macomb Orchard Trail?
At the in Romeo near Powell Road, at the intersection of the trail at Powell Road.
I guess for the jurors, would you describe when you normally start your app tracker?
Normally, I would start my app tracker as we're beginning the ride. My wife's, when we took off, I took off behind her, and I remembered a little bit later that I had forgotten to start it, so I started it a little bit late that day.
About how many, well, I guess what distance down the road did you start it?
I would have to guess maybe 100 yards or something.
So we're not talking a mile, 2 mile, or anything like that?
No, just a short ways.
Short ways. All right. going to hand you people's proposed exhibit number 116 and ask, just look at that generally and see if you recognize that.
Yes.
Okay. Would you describe to the jury what it is that's on that photograph or on that sheet of paper?
This shows a map of the trail, and the numbers on it, I believe, are lap indications or something that are coming off of my app, but I'm not sure. I know it gives something like that. But this is a map printout of the trail in the area of Armada.
The app tracker that you have, is it consistent with the other ones that we've heard about, that it stores the information and the path and the distance to a, I guess, a website or a storage place that you have access to through your phone?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you were being interviewed by the police and then subsequently by our office, you were able to provide the website and the documentation to show the ride from that particular day?
Yes.
And this then is a summary, a face sheet summary of the information from that ride?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, we would move to the introduction of People's Number 116.
No objection, Your Honor.
If you would please step down for just a second. And just so we could clear something up, how tall are you?
6'1", 6'1.5".
Okay. Just good. All right. I'm not. Where are you going? Sorry, I need to be clear. Okay. So if we look at this, would you indicate for the record what time when you were 100 yards down the road and you switched the unit on, is that the time that the unit is switched on for the ride?
Yes.
Okay, and that time is what?
5:58.
Okay. That's right, 5:58. Okay, so that's 17:58 in terms of Army time. All right. Just again for the record, what was the duration of the ride?
Around 15 miles, 15.26.
And how long did it take to drive that?
Don't recall exactly.
Here's the number.
Right here.
There you go.
1 hour, 19 minutes. Yes.
Okay. It's not required for you to have independent memory. What is the average speed?
11.6 miles an hour.
And it actually lists a maximum speed for you?
Yes, 10.5.
I never believed the calories part because there's no way. And then in terms of elevation, just gives the other information about the ride.
Right.
And in looking at this, is this an accurate reflection, I guess, of where you started and where you went and how you came back?
Yes.
Okay. If you would, could we put up exhibit number 33, please? This is People's Exhibit number 33. We have shown you this before. Do you recognize what we're looking at here?
Yes.
Okay. Can you show us approximately where it was that the testimony we're about to get into with the young lady in the motorcycle, where it was that you saw them?
We were coming in the trail heading in this direction, and as we were coming around the trail, as the trail began to straighten out, we could see them in the distance. I would estimate somewhere in this area here.
So right by what's listed as Liberty Lane?
Yeah, we didn't know that was there at the time
Right.
from the view of the trail, but yes.
Okay. Then, stay there. I'm going to hand you what is People's Proposed Exhibit number 117. And obviously, this is a disc. You know what's on this disc?
Yes.
Would you explain what it is to the jury?
This is a download from the website with this data on it.
Okay, and we've gone over this with you?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, we would move to the introduction of People's Exhibit number 117.
No objection, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
All right, if you would, Craig, throw that up on the screen. What I would like to just simply do is, obviously here's Liberty Trail and the path that you took. Would you, can you show me where the arrow is up here, Craig? Are we up here yet?
Not yet.
Okay, just hold on. All right, stop. I'm going to give you my pen. Would you put my pen on the spot where you approximate that you saw the motorcycle and allow him to then bring that red arrow to it.
Near this area here.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we look at that, then we look down here, and what's the elapsed time on that?
26.44 minutes.
So according to your app, then, at approximately 26.44 minutes, if you started at 17:58, 100 yards up the road, that was when you encountered the young man on the motorcycle.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all. We can take that down. You can have a seat, Mr. Stein. Doug. According to your wife, it's easier to do this sort of testimony when someone's already testified, so I can skip some of the slower stuff. According to her, it's approximately 5.1 miles from where you started at Powell Road to Fulton Road.
Yes.
During the time, are the two of you comparing then the speeds between your app and her odometer?
Not that I recall.
Okay. At any time did you do that during the ride itself?
I don't remember on that one. Periodically we do, just to check the accuracies. Usually maybe at the time we're ready to turn around, I might check the odometer against hers, but yeah.
The first part of that trip is approximately 5.1 miles to Fulton Road. Do you come to a stop at Fulton Road? If you recall, on July 24th.
Yes, we stop at that road to cross because it's an intersection and we have to wait for traffic, yes.
Then you're familiar that once you cross the road, there's the granary up on the right-hand side?
Yes.
As the two of you pass the granary, between the granary, I guess, and the young man on the motorcycle, do you pass anybody else? We're going to talk about the young girl and the young man on the trail in just a second. Between Fulton Road, where you pass the granary, to the point where you first observed those two, do you see anybody else on that portion of the trail?
I don't remember seeing anybody.
As you are approaching that area, in what order are you and your wife riding?
We normally try to ride together where we can, so I was riding to the left of her, she was on the right side of the trail, and I was to her left.
And you're heading east toward Olmo Road?
Correct.
What, I guess, is your first observation then of the young lady and the motorcycle, the gentleman on the motorcycle?
We saw the two people on the side of the road or on the left side of the trail they were near each other, they looked to be talking, and then on the opposite side of the trail I could see a motorcycle parked.
When you indicate to the jury that it looked like they were talking, could you physically describe what it is that you saw that had you come to that conclusion?
There was just some body motion that looked like they were engaged. They weren't just standing looking at each other. There looked to be some engagement.
When you say engagement, did it appear that they were touching?
No.
Could you give an estimate, even from the distance that you were at, of the distance between the two of them?
Maybe a foot.
The bike itself, what direction is the bike itself facing?
I don't recall the direction the bike was facing.
Do you recall whether or not the bike was running or not?
The bike was not running.
And you would, how did you come to that conclusion?
When we rode by, there was no noise from the motorcycle.
Did you see a light on the bike itself?
No.
Keeping with your observations, let's focus first on the young lady and the dog. Did you see the girl as you approached?
Yes, as we started to approach, the two people separated ways. She started walking on the trail toward us with her dog, and we passed her first.
If I can be clear, I guess, about something, I'm just going to lay this as a flat surface, and we're just going to say that at some point, this is the width of the trail.
Okay.
This is the north side, this is the south side. My understanding is your wife is on this side and you're riding on that side.
Initially, yes.
Correct. The young lady and the man that you see up ahead, what side of the trail, are they on the Penn side or the bottle side, do you indicate that you first see them?
The Penn side.
All right. And when you see them standing there, what side of the trail is the bike on?
On the bottle side, or
Okay,
the
so
soap side.
they're actually, the two of them are on your side of the trail or the north side of the trail, and the bike is it on a kickstand or is it
Yes,
standing
it's
upside
on,
down?
it's on a kickstand, and I distinctly remember seeing a helmet hanging from the handlebar on the trail side of the motorcycle.
Can you give a description, I guess, of the helmet itself?
Not much, I just remember it being black or very dark.
Do you remember whether it was full face or open like your biking helmet?
I don't recall.
It was hanging on the handlebars, you indicated?
Yes.
So they were across the trail, motorcycles on one side. As you begin to approach, would you describe what the young lady does as the two break up? Or
When
apart?
she just is walking at a normal pace with her dog, she seemed to be looking down. When I passed her, her head was downcast, looking at the ground or something.
Can you describe her height, size, what she was wearing?
Very small, very petite young lady. She was wearing a very loose-fitting white blouse.
Can you give an age range?
I would say high teens, mid-teens, somewhere in there.
Were you ever able to identify the young lady that you saw?
At the time, or?
I mean, we know it's April, what we've been told a young lady on the trail is April Millsap. Would you be able to identify her?
Yes.
Okay. If we could put up People's Exhibit number 1 and just ask you to lean forward.
You can get up if you
Is that the young girl that you saw on the trail?
Yes.
Okay. Stay right there for a second. Did you see if she had a dog with her?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what type of dog it was?
I don't recall paying much attention to the dog. I knew there was a dog, but I don't know what kind of
Would you be able to recognize the dog at all?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Have a seat. Thank you. You can take that down, correct. Was the dog on a leash?
Yes.
Did you have any apprehension about the dog?
No, not at all.
Would you describe, if you could, we know that you indicated that the young lady's head was down. Could you see anything that she was doing?
No, I didn't pay attention to that.
Did you see her facial expression?
No, not really. Again, she was looking down a little bit. She looked up a little bit to look at me, but I didn't get much of a sense of a mood from her.
We know that your wife has testified as to the interaction she had with her. Did you see your wife interact with April?
No, as soon as we saw them, as normal when we come by somebody on the trail, I moved over behind my wife. I slowed down a little bit and got in behind her to make room on the trail for other people. So I didn't
How
really...
does that, I guess, obscure your vision of what's going on then ahead of your wife?
Partly just my wife was blocking the way a little bit, but plus also my attention gets diverted a little bit to making sure I'm not running into the back of her too. But
About how far behind her were you when you passed April?
I would say a couple yards.
Do you say anything to April as you ride past?
No.
Does she look up and say anything to you?
No.
Does she ask for any help?
No.
Is there any interaction that you see from April with the two of you?
No.
You indicate that as you're approaching then, April's moving forward, the other person is walking across the path. Once that starts, I guess, are you able to keep constant observation of him from where you are?
No.
What's the next thing that you see of that person or of the motorcycle?
I see the back of this, the other person walking down the trail in the direction of the motorcycle. And we passed that person and then passed the motorcycle to our right.
Would you be able to identify that person if you saw him again?
No.
Can you describe an item of clothing, or can you describe at all any type of clothing that that individual was wearing?
Only that they seemed to be dark colored, maybe work type clothes.
Were they clothes that would be considered weather appropriate for the trail?
No.
Did you have any interaction with that individual?
No.
Do you know if that individual, did that individual, as you looked, have any interaction with either your wife or yourself?
Not that I saw.
As you passed this scene, do you talk about it with Mary?
After we passed the scene,
Right.
yes.
What is it that you say to her about what you just saw?
Mary commented to me that that was really strange, and I said, yes, it was. I wonder what the motorcycle was doing on the trail.
Did you get a sense of any personal involvement between the two, or any disputes or anything like that?
No.
How much further down the trail, I guess, do you go then as you continue to move forward?
We went another 2.5 miles down the trail, and both of us at that time stopped when we turned around, and we just continually kind of talked a little bit since then about that was really strange. My wife made a comment about I wonder if there's like an older boyfriend or something, that there was just something strange about that.
And that was while you were still on the trail?
Yes.
When you came to your turnaround point, did you stop to hydrate for any period of time?
I'm sure we stopped and had a drink of water. We normally do at that point in time.
On the return trip, first of all, do you see anybody at all on the return trip from where you stopped to that point at the Liberty Trail?
I do recall passing an older gentleman walking. He had street clothes on and he was talking on the cell phone, and I remember that, but I don't remember anybody else.
The dog that was there the first time, did you see the dog when you went past?
No.
The young lady that you saw the first time, did you see her when you went past?
No.
The gentleman that was on the south side of the trail, did you see him when you went past that second time?
No.
You had indicated a motorcycle with a helmet hanging on the handlebars. Did you see that when you went past the second time?
No.
Anything, I guess, then significant about the rest of the ride that day?
No, not that I can recall.
Can you, I guess, give a description of the type of bike that it was, motorcycle that you saw on the side of the road?
I just remember it being a small, smaller bike, like not very high number of cc, like not a big road bike or anything like that, but a smaller bike, more for recreation.
In your youth, did you ride motorbikes?
A little bit. I had an enduro bike when I was a teenager.
Was this bike consistent then with what you know as an enduro bike?
Similar, yes.
Did you take into any observation at all colors of that bike as you passed by?
I don't recall the colors, no.
Approximately, I guess, how much time elapsed, if you can tell, between the time that you passed the motorcycle the first time and you went back the second time?
It was probably close to 20 minutes again,
Okay.
maybe a little bit more.
Anything else, I guess, unusual on that ride?
No.
When, I guess, would you tell the jury how it was that you became aware? What we're going to do is put your app up and get the timing on the way back. So
Okay.
while Craig is doing that, I don't want to waste any time. I'll ask you some questions. When is it that you become aware that a young lady had been murdered on the Orchard Trail?
I was at work the next day, and my wife called me, and she had been watching the news because there was another gentleman attacked by dogs or something up in Metamora area, and she had heard about that, and she turned on the news to watch that, and then she saw at that same time that a young girl had been murdered on the trail, and she suspected that it was potentially the time we were on the trail.
When did the police come out to interview the two of you at the task force?
I believe it was Friday night, the same day we were concerned about, or we heard about the murder, and suspected that maybe we had some information that could potentially be of value for the police. Did the police write out a statement that you reviewed, or did you write out your own statement at that time for the police? I believe we talked and they wrote down what we said. And then you initialed it? Yes. At no time have you ever been able to say that you could identify the gentleman that you saw on that motorcycle? Correct. Did there come a time, though, in describing the motorcycle that you saw, did you attempt to then go online to find a similar bike? Yes. How did that come about? I can't remember if the detective or police, because I said that I saw the motorcycle, and he said, well, if you can give me any indication of what you think it looked like, that would be helpful. So I went online and just looked at pictures of motorcycles on the internet, and picked one that I thought was similar in size and type, and I sent that to him. I may have jumped ahead a little bit. When, I guess, in this whole process, again, Mary has testified, so we have an idea of the sort of time periods in which communication was had between yourself and the investigative team. We know that it happened on July 24th. We know that you were interviewed late that evening on July 25th. When was it that you would have gone about attempting to secure a photograph off the internet for that motorcycle? On Saturday, the following day. So very quickly in the investigation? Yes. I'm going to hand you People's Proposed Exhibit number 118. And ask if you can recognize what's in that photograph. Yes, I believe this is the picture that I sent saying this is similar to the motorcycle that I saw. At this time, Your Honor, people would move for the introduction of proposed exhibit number 118.
No objection at all, Your Honor.
Just real quickly, if you would come down, Doug, and take a look at that. And describe why it is that you selected that to send to the police. What are the similarities that you saw that this was your selection?
Just in terms of the overall size of the motorcycle was small, the tires were thinner on it, the size of the engine seemed about similar, the handlebars seemed similar, so just that type of bicycle or motorcycle seemed about what I remembered riding by.
And this wasn't with an intent to say this was the bike, this was an intent to say what?
It was just this is the size of the motorcycle, so it wouldn't be confused with a bigger motorcycle.
Like a Harley or something?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Have a seat. Hold on a second. We have the app up. Okay, if you would. Come on down, Doug. Just stay with me while I just want you to read the number. Craig, if you would, run it all the way to the end and bring it back for me. So if you would indicate it was right about there?
Yes.
Would you read that number for me?
Would be an elapsed time of 46 minutes and 41 seconds.
All right, so we have 46:41 on this, and it was 26:44, so approximately 20 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You can take it down there. When you and Mary were writing back, and when you were talking about the incident on that Friday and Saturday, did you ever ask her if she saw the young man's face?
No, we really didn't talk about that so much.
When did it become, well, now I understand that you guys went to the movies on Saturday night, and you had a conversation with the police after the movie. Would you tell the jury what that was about?
The conversation with the police,
On Saturday night about a composite?
the police had called and talked to me and said that they were interested in if we could come down and help out with a composite or something like that. And I talked to Mary about it, and she said she really wasn't comfortable giving or working on a composite. She didn't believe that she could describe it well enough for someone to draw an accurate picture.
Is that the first time that you, I guess, realized that she had seen the face?
Yes.
Were you able to participate in any composite whatsoever?
No.
Are you present with Mary when the composite comes out on Sunday?
No.
When you see the composite, you're not able to say yes or no, whether it matches or whether it doesn't match?
That's correct.
After that sequence of events, what's your, I guess, next communication with the police?
I think my next communication that I can recall is Mary had an interview with the detective in Romeo. I wasn't able to attend because I was on a business trip, I believe. When I returned, Mary was gone, and I went into Romeo and had my interview with the detective in Romeo.
And after that, did you have any other than interviews or communications with the police?
I don't recall that we did, no.
Okay, Mr. Stein, thank you very much, Doug. I have no further questions. Mr. Chief will have some for you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Stein.
Good afternoon.
Just a couple of brief questions, sir. First of all, you did talk to the police in giving a description of the gentleman. I know today you said you can't remember much about the gentleman. Do you remember indicating that you thought April was a teenager, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember indicating to the police you thought he was maybe just within her age range, maybe a couple of years older?
I don't remember that comment.
Okay. Do you remember the police taking notes when you spoke to them?
Yes.
Do you remember writing out a statement for the police? Approximate 6-page statement?
That I wrote out, or they wrote along with my interview? I think...
That's a good question. I think it's just handwritten. All right. Let's say, is your recollection that it was written by somebody else and you just signed it?
The interview on Friday night, yes.
going to quote you with part of the statement, okay?
Okay.
Just take a look at that for yourself.
Okay.
Mr. Costello, that's page 483 of the discovery.
What page of the statement? How about that?
Page 4 of the 6-page statement.
What is it? Okay. Just go ahead.
Okay. Sir, do you recognize this as your handwriting, or is this a police officer's handwriting?
It was the police officer's handwriting.
Okay. And are those your initials on virtually every other line?
Yes.
And did you place those there?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'm asking, do you recall any earrings or jewelry he may have worn? And you said nothing stands out. My feelings was that he was a few years older than her.
Okay. Yes, that's
You
what
recall
I...
testimony.
yeah.
Okay. So do you stand by that, or are you saying that the police officer erroneously wrote that?
No, I'm sure I probably said that.
Okay.
I wasn't able to see his face, so I wasn't able to get a good idea of the age, so...
And that's fine. I'm not trying to... I just wanted to verify the fact that
Okay.
that is what you said. Could you put up the motorcycle that he just... 118, please. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step down a little bit, if you would, up towards the motorcycle. This is the motorcycle that you went online and did some research to try to recall the motorcycle that you saw that this gentleman had, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were you under any pressure to do it within a few minutes or within a certain amount of time?
No,
This was on your own volition. Was this at home or at work?
at home.
Okay, at home. You're comfortable, it's your home, it's your computer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see other motorcycles before you got to this one?
Yeah, there were a lot of pictures of motorcycles online, yeah.
Okay. And did you see some after you got to this one and you said, that's it, I'm not looking anymore? Or did you recall seeing any after this?
There was a lot of them around this size, different colors and things like that, but this one was one I picked out as being reasonable representation of what I remembered seeing.
Okay. And again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but as you look at this, is there anything either in the color scheme, the fender, the height, anything here that you wish to change? Is this still your recollection of what that motorcycle looked like?
I don't have a good memory of the vehicle, of the motorcycle, other than it being small like this and dirty. I just don't remember so many more details.
Do you remember if the fender line was approximately like this?
I don't even remember if it had a fender, so
The tires, do you remember if they were knobby at all like this?
I don't recall, no.
Do you remember if the color scheme was like this?
I don't recall the colors.
So this was supposed to depict just the size, is what you're indicating?
Mostly, yes.
The seat, the way the configuration is, was that similar to the motorcycle?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Do you remember seeing the kickstand?
I know it was on a kickstand because it was leaning to the side a little bit, but I saw that.
Do you remember either seeing writing that's similar to 125 or similar to the word Yamaha?
No.
On that bike? Do you remember seeing a rear view mirror?
No, I don't.
Thank you, ma'am. And who was it that you supplied that photograph to?
I don't remember the name. It was the detective or sergeant that that was speaking with us at the time. I don't remember the name.
And just so that we're clear, you folks were headed east on the trail, and that's when you pass the young lady, April Millsap, and this person, correct?
Yes,
And then when you headed back west, you don't see either one of them, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
No, redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You're excused. Ma'am, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
And your first name is spelled?
Larissa.
And your last name?
L-A, capital M-A-Y.
May I, Judge? Would you indicate where you're employed and what your current assignment is?
I'm employed with the Michigan State Police, and I'm currently assigned to a FBI task force for human trafficking
And where are you based out of? Like, where do you go to work each day? Where's your office?
in the city of Detroit
How long have you held that assignment?
since July of this year, of 2015.
What was your assignment previous to that?
I was assigned to the Michigan State Police Oak Park post as a post detective.
All right. Well, you keep your voice up if you could. Just imagine this person back here has to hear your voice and everybody else will hear you. How long have you been with the state police?
Just over 17 years.
You've held the detective position at the Oak Park Post, the current position involving human trafficking investigations. What other assignments have you held?
Prior to the post assignment, I was assigned to the major crimes team, homicide team located in Detroit.
Okay.
And I've done fraud, narcotics, patrol, and gaming.
Done almost everything in the state police so far.
I've done a lot. I've been
All right.
fortunate.
Were you part of a group of officers who in July of 2014 were investigating April Millsap's death?
I was.
And specifically, I'm going to take you to July 30th of 2014. Were you part of a group of officers from the state and local and perhaps federal authorities as well who executed a search warrant at James VanCallis' residence?
I was.
Were you part of the initial entry, like the breach of the door that day, or what was your positioning?
I was not part of the entry team. I was behind the entry team. The entry was done by a SWAT team.
Okay. So they make entry initially, and are you following in close order behind them?
Yes.
Okay. What was your primary assignment that day? I'm assuming that there wasn't just a SWAT team and you. There were other officers there, correct?
Correct.
You know Sergeant Peckman also from your agency?
Yes, I do.
He was there that day?
Correct.
Chief of Armada Police?
Yes.
Multiple other officers?
Yes.
What was your job that day?
My job was to search for evidence.
All right. Did you go in the various rooms of the home that day?
I did.
I'm going to show you a group of photographs, and these are numbered 119 through 129. I've shown them all to counsel. I'm going to ask you to take a look at them and see if you recognize these as being photos taken from the search of that house. Have you had a chance to look at those?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize those as photographs of items and rooms and various portions of the residence, inside and outside from that date?
Yes, I do.
I move to admit all of those items that are up there. That is 119 through 129.
No objection, Your Honor.
And do you also recall cell phone being taken from the front entranceway that was on a counter area?
I do.
Do you recall it being consistent with this phone and having a Michigan State Police evidence tag on it?
I do.
I'd move to admit 130.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, I'm going to have some of the photographs published to the jury. We're going to start with 119. Would you indicate, and if you need to step down, actually I'd prefer you to step down, but I also need you to keep your voice up because there's no microphone right next to you. So take a look at the screen, and I want you to be close enough to point at the screen if I ask you about certain items, and I'll hand you this as well. Do you recognize this portion of the home?
I do.
What room is that?
That would be a bedroom-type room located on the east side of the house.
And do you recall that room and another room being identified as living quarters for James VanCallis and Crystal Stadler?
I do.
Do you see a computer on a table right there?
Yes, I do.
Can you just point that out, please?
Right here.
All right. And actually, Craig, if you could you just box around the screen and down around this area right here? Nope, going a little too far over, this way. That's good. Do you see the keyboard for that?
I do right here?
Do you also see a hand sanitizer bottle right there?
Yes, right here.
All right. That computer was seized that day as well?
Yes, it was.
And ultimately the hand sanitizer was seized?
Yes.
To your knowledge? Okay. I'm going to show you what is marked as People's Exhibit 120. Display that now for you. Do you recognize that?
I do?
Do you see that same chair now in the right side of the picture?
Yes, that would be here.
All right, so this is a different view of the same room.
Correct.
In the background, I see a cardboard box. Do you see that adjacent to the television?
I do?
Craig, could you put a box around that, please? What else do we see on top of that box?
Black motorcycle helmet.
That motorcycle helmet, to your knowledge, was seized that day?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed there's some items around it. What are we seeing, like, lying over the top of the box?
On the top of the box looks like there's some clothing, some socks.
And I'm going to direct your attention to the item right behind the Hungry Man meal. What do you see there?
I see a bottle of Windex cleaner, window cleaner.
Could you display? This is going to be 121. Is that the helmet closer up?
Yes, it is.
Now I'm still seeing what appear to be some cardboard and some socks all around it, but this is a closer up picture of it.
Correct.
Let me ask you something here, and I'm going to point it out myself to ask you. The streaking right here in this area, did you put that on, or law enforcement put that on that day?
No, sir.
Give this back. I'm going to show you what I want. This is People's Exhibit 122. You have it? Do you recognize that as another view of the helmet?
Yes.
Do you recognize that as a side view towards the back?
Yes.
Let me have the pointer again. I know I gave it to you, but this streaking right here on the helmet, do you recall putting that on there?
No. I did not.
Did you notice it that day?
I noticed that the helmet was clean and shiny.
Do you actually see it reflecting the items behind it in the lower half?
I do.
I want to have displayed now People's Exhibit 123. You recognize this to be more of a back picture of the helmet?
I do.
Quick, could you focus in on the helmet itself. Do you know, did you put these streak marks on here?
I did not.
What about these stray, I guess you'd call them fibers?
I did not.
You notice the reflection again in that picture?
I do.
What did you call them? Did you say fibers?
That's what I characterized it as, yes.
That's fine. I just want to make sure.
I did. In fact, would you go in a little bit closer, Craig? Down into this area? People's Exhibit 1, 2, 4. Got it? What are we looking at here?
We're looking at the bathroom.
All right. In terms of the, there's a couple of items here. There's some clothing hanging up. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you do see a bucket of water adjacent to the toilet and the shower there?
Yes.
Do you remember seeing that?
I do.
And then, Craig, could you show 125, please? Those are some of the same clothing items now placed down onto paper. Is that what we're seeing?
That's correct.
Those items were seized?
Yes, they were.
This is People's Exhibit 126. Do you recall that item?
I do.
That looks like it's also on the floor on some paper.
Correct, yes.
That was seized that day?
Yes.
Then I have 127. Do you remember that backpack being seized that day from the residence?
I do.
This is one. Did you also see the outside of the house?
I did.
This is 128. What is this a picture of?
It's a black garbage bag with 3 white tennis shoes.
Do you recall there being an area of debris, for lack of a better word, adjacent to the residence?
Yeah, it was on the west side of the house. It was a rather large area of debris.
Do you recall if those items were retrieved from that debris pile?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And in fact, looking at those 2 shoes, keeping in mind what they look like now, and I'm going to show you a picture of the bottom of one of those on People's Exhibit 129. Do you recognize that as being a picture of the bottom of one of the shoes?
I do.
You are not a, I guess, an expert in footwear impressions. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
But at this point, there was a photograph taken of the bottom of that shoe.
Correct.
In general terms, were shoes and the bottoms of the shoes something that you and the other detectives were looking at?
Yes, it was.
Was that based on information you had been briefed on and pictures you had seen already in this case?
Yes, it was.
All right. How long were you out there that day?
All day. I can't give you an hours, but it was an all day into the evening event.
Okay. Do you recall the defendant's father being there?
I do.
Do you recall the defendant being there?
Yes, I do.
If you saw him again, or the person, well, you know who James VanCallis is, right?
Correct.
Do you see him in court?
I do.
Where is he seated?
He's sitting right over here to my right.
All right. You remember him from that day?
I do.
You can go ahead and have a seat. I think Mr. Sheets going to have some questions for you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Should I call you trooper or detective?
Detective is fine.
Detective. All these items that we saw, they were all checked for fingerprints, DNA, and any kind of forensic evidence as far as you know?
I do not know.
So you don't know if any of them had anything associated with April Dawn Millsap, correct?
I did not test them. I don't know.
Okay. So you can't enlighten the jury as to that, correct?
No, I cannot.
Okay. And would you say for the most part that most of these items are pretty much out in the open? You come in, the hand sanitizer sitting right in front of the keyboard, right by the computer, right? It's not hidden?
Correct.
The clothes are just hanging there in the shower area, right?
Correct.
The helmet is laying on top of that cardboard box, right?
Correct.
Now, when I look at it, I thought that looked like dirt and stuff. How do we know that's not a dirty helmet as opposed to streaks? Did you actually touch it or do some sort of testing to see?
I did not do any testing on it.
Okay, so that's the word that Mr. Daly used today to refer to as streaks, correct?
Correct.
You don't put in your report a helmet recovered with streaks, correct?
I did not, no.
Now, as far as the bags of debris, you indicated there were many bags of debris, right?
Yes.
Not to put you on the spot, would you say they were like 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, or more?
More,
Did you say maybe 15 to 20?
at least.
Okay. And were they all searched?
Yes.
Was anything found other than those shoes of, that was seized?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And do you know how many pairs of shoes were seized?
I don't know how many pairs.
Multiple pairs, all right?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, more than one pair? We see
There was
threes.
3, so I would assume multiples.
Okay. Would it help you to look at your notes to see how many pairs of shoes were seized?
Sure.
Do you have your notes with you?
I don't have a report with me.
You didn't bring it with you, huh? Do you have a copy? Well, let's just say for sake of argument, there were multiple pairs of shoes, correct?
Correct.
Okay, not just one pair. And then there's one pair that you, I believe in the last picture, or picture 129, I believe, where you were showing the soles. Did you ever come to find out if they had any evidentiary value regarding this case?
I don't believe that they did.
Okay. The information you had with the shoes were that there were some things that looked like shoe marks on the young lady's neck area, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you, of all the things there, you were probably super heightened about looking for shoes, I would think, right?
Was one of the items we were looking for.
Okay. Did you happen to notice if there were dogs on the property at all?
There were.
More than one dog?
Yes.
Approximately how many, if you recall?
4 to 5.
4 to 5 dogs. Was there any dog droppings in the lawn area at all around the house?
Yes.
Did any officers get any lawn droppings on their shoes, if you know?
I did not. I don't know if anybody else did.
Okay. And that's just part of the job, so that would not be something that would make people stop us. Stop! I got to take the poo-poo off my shoes, right?
No.
Okay. But certainly there was 4 or 5 dogs, and there was definitely dog droppings around the property, correct? Okay. Do you remember seeing the generator on the property, just outside or in the garage?
I don't recall.
So there could have been one, they could not, you just don't remember recall,
Correct.
correct? Just one second. Down to either of those?
I don't know that.
Okay. Thank you, I have nothing further. Thank you.
I know you're right,
Thank you, you're excused. Next witness?
That's what I'm telling you. Your Honor, Monica Borowski. And I indicated, and I appreciate, we're calling our lab people a little bit out of order. That's what the jury understands.
We have no objection, and Your Honor, if anything, the prosecution's been very diligent in letting us know what this is expected. We appreciate that.
Ma'am, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
And your first name is Monica?
Yes.
Would you spell your last name?
B-A-R-Y-L-S-K-I.
Okay, have a seat and speak loudly.
Good afternoon.
Would you indicate where you are employed and what your job is?
I'm a forensic scientist in the biology unit of the Michigan State Police Northville Laboratory.
And what sorts of, scientific disciplines are housed at the Northville Laboratory?
At the Northville Laboratory, we have controlled substances, trace analysis, latent print analysis, and forensic biology, which is where I work in the biology unit.
And do you have some schooling or training that precedes you to allow you to have this position?
Yes, I have Bachelor of Science degrees in Criminal Justice and Biological Sciences from Wayne State University, and I also underwent an extensive training program within the Michigan State Police before beginning work in casework.
And how long have you done or held the position that you currently hold?
For approximately 6 years.
Have you testified in court before?
Yes, I have.
Have you been qualified as an expert before in court?
Yes, I have.
And what field or fields have you been qualified as an expert in court previously?
I've been qualified as an expert in forensic biology and DNA analysis.
You are our DNA analyst, one of them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would move to have our witness qualified as an expert in her field of forensic biology, DNA analysis.
No objection.
Okay, the jury's to consider her as an expert in that field.
There are different types of DNA testing, is that correct?
That's correct.
You performed in this case a particular sort of DNA testing.
Yes.
Is that correct? And I guess there are certain underlying questions I have about DNA. In general terms, what is DNA? Just to get a foundation so we can understand what you're going to talk about in your results.
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and it's like a set of instructions that's found in the cells of our bodies. It codes for how our bodies function, as well as things like hair and eye color that make us unique. DNA is inherited, so you get half from your mother and half from your father. Excuse me.
Is DNA in each of the, for instance, skin cells in a person's body?
Yes, DNA is found in any cell in the body that contains a nucleus. So it's found in things such as skin cells and body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva.
So those are things ultimately that you're going to be looking for to perhaps do comparative analysis. Does that sound about right?
Yes. The DNA analysis process involves testing evidence items, and if a DNA profile is obtained from the evidence, then we can compare it to a reference sample, which is typically a buccal swab, which is just a swab of the inside of someone's cheek, and that's used as a source of known DNA for that particular individual. So if a DNA profile is obtained from an evidence item, we can then compare that to a DNA profile from a buccal sample to determine if it matches or if it doesn't match.
In this case, you authored 4 separate reports. Does that sound about right to you?
That's correct.
And in each of those reports, there are a number of items that were tested. Is that also right?
That is correct.
And I already kind of indicated to the jury we're doing this a little bit out of order. The evidence in this case, did it come directly into the lab to your desk, or what? How does it move?
No, the evidence in this case was brought to our Sterling Heights laboratory, where it was processed by another scientist, also a biologist. She collected samples that were then sent to my laboratory in Northville, where I performed DNA analysis on the samples that she sent forward.
So we're going to be talking about some items that you attempted to develop a DNA profile on, as well as certain then known reference samples obtained from buccal swabs. Does that also sound correct?
Yes.
And your colleague also performed some DNA testing in this case, Andrea Halverson-Young.
Yes,
She did a different sort of DNA testing.
that's correct.
Can you tell the jury what sort of DNA testing you did or attempted to do?
The DNA testing that I performed is called autosomal DNA testing, and that involves looking at different locations in the DNA. So in this particular case, I look at 16 different locations in somebody's DNA. One of those locations serves to tell me whether it's from a male or a female, and I know this because females will have 2 X chromosomes and a male will have an X and a Y. And the other 15 locations, those are the autosomal DNA locations that we look at, and those serve to distinguish between individual people, because everybody's DNA profile, with the exception of an identical twin, is unique to that person. The other type of DNA analysis, which was performed by my colleague, looks only at DNA that's on the Y chromosome or only at male DNA.
So when you, and I guess, again, and you're going to understand this more than probably any of us are, when you take some DNA, how are you able to take that little tiny bit of information and make it such that you can review it in any meaningful way and then compare it to a known sample, a buccal swab sample?
So when I receive a sample in the lab for DNA analysis, there are several steps involved in generating the DNA profile. So typically it will come in as either a swab that's in a tube or perhaps a cutting of fabric. But the first step is to add chemicals to that sample to break open the cells and then remove the DNA. Once I've removed only the DNA from that sample, I then determine how much DNA is present, and I make millions of copies of those 16 different locations that I look at. Once the copies are made, the sample is placed on an instrument that separates the DNA types by size, and it gives a computer-generated picture of the DNA profile. Now, each person will have 1 or 2 DNA types at each of those locations. So based on that, I can determine a minimum number of contributors for each sample. So if I obtain a DNA profile, and at each of those 16 locations there's 1 or 2 DNA types, I know that that is a DNA profile from a single person. If there's more than that, for instance, if there's 3 or 4 DNA types at a location, then I can tell that that's a mixture of DNA from at least 2 people. Now, when there is a mixture of DNA, it's possible that one person can contribute more DNA to that sample than another, and that person is called the major DNA donor. The person who contributes a smaller amount of DNA would be the minor donor. It's also possible that 2 people could contribute an equal amount of DNA, in which case I would just have a mixture. I wouldn't be able to say if there's a major or a minor donor. And at that point, when I compare it to a reference sample, all I can say is whether a person could be a contributor or is excluded as a contributor.
In this case, and we're going to talk about each of the items you tested and what the results were. Well, your attempts, I guess, didn't always work to develop a DNA profile on each item. Is that also correct?
Yes, there were some items that I was not able to obtain a DNA profile from.
But on some, you did find what I would term a mixture. Is that a right term?
Yes.
And on some of those mixtures, you were able to determine a major and a minor were present.
That's correct.
In some, you were not.
That's correct.
Okay. So I want to start with your, and if you need to refer to the notes in front of you, do you have them actually?
Yes, I have my reports, if I could
Do you
refer
have
to
the
those,
full
please.
reports?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm referring for the record and for counsel to record number 6. Going through the items that were submitted as evidence for you to develop a DNA profile on. Victim's tank top swab,
Yes.
victim's short swab,
Yes. to give weight to that match. So in this case, the statistical estimate just gives an estimation of the probability of selecting a random person from the population that could have a DNA profile that would be the same as the DNA profile in that evidence. And in this particular case, that probability is 1 in 13.61 quintillion for the Caucasian population, 1 in 313.5 sextillion for the African American population, and 1 in 104.8 quintillion for the Hispanic population. And just to put that into perspective, a quintillion has 18 zeros, and a sextillion has 21 zeros, while a million only has 6. So they're very large numbers. I would not expect another person to have that DNA profile. So that was the major DNA types that matched April Millsap's buccal swab.
All right. And then what about the minor?
The minor donor in this case was too limited, and it was insufficient for conclusive association purposes, so I was not able to make any comparisons to the minor donor to the victim's tank top swabs.
And then we have, I know they don't have the report in front of them, but I guess you report it out, so we're going to talk about it. You have this last port. You've already indicated to the jury that the major portion matched to that degree of probability of statistically picking a random person amongst these populations with all the zeros. But
yes,
you also then have to report out that all these other people didn't match the major donor.
That's correct. The other buccal swabs I looked at, which were Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis, were excluded as the major donor to that sample. And again, I made no comparisons to the minor donor because there was not enough information there to be suitable for comparison.
I'm going to keep going through these items because we need to explain to the jury what you did. But I want to ask you, in all 4 of the reports, and each of the items in the reports, were you able to take an unknown sample and match that to anybody but April Millsap?
There were samples that matched other individuals, yes.
We're going to talk about a couple of those. Actually, well, we won't talk about them in this one, but we will get there. Let's talk about the shorts.
The DNA types obtained from the victim's shorts indicate that at least 3 donors are associated with that sample. And again, in that case, the major DNA types matched the buccal swab from April Millsap, and the statistical estimate is the same as the previous major DNA profile. So it's the same numbers that I just gave you. And again, in that case, the limited DNA results from the minor donors are insufficient for comparison purposes, so I could make no comparisons to the minor donors. And the other 5 buccal swabs that I looked at were excluded as the major donor to that sample.
What about her bra swabs?
The DNA profile from the victim's bra swab matches the DNA profile from April Millsap. And again, that's the same statistical estimate that I gave you for the tank top and the shorts. And in that case, that was a single source profile that from one individual that matched April Millsap, and the buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis were excluded as being donors to that sample.
Regarding the vaginal swabs and the victim's left nail swabs, I indicated to you earlier there's a parenthetical indicating possible saliva. Can you indicate how that comes to be put onto your report?
That is a result of the previous testing that was done by my colleague Jennifer Summers at the Sterling Heights lab before it was sent for DNA analysis. So she selects the DNA samples to send forward and gives them a description and an item number, and that description is what I keep in my report after my analysis.
And were you able to develop then DNA profiles from those swabs?
Yes, the DNA profile from the vaginal swabs, the right nail swab, and the left nail swab indicated no DNA foreign to April Millsap's buccal swab, which means that those are swabs from April Millsap's person, and it's expected that her DNA would be present on those samples. And there was no DNA that was not consistent with April Millsap's DNA on those 3 samples.
So to be clear, the right nail swabs, left nail swabs of April, and the vaginal swabs, there was no DNA except for April's.
That's correct.
Regarding the cell phone case and the iPhone swabs,
I obtained limited DNA results from both of those samples, and in both of those samples, the DNA types obtained were too limited for comparison purposes, so I could not make any comparisons to those items.
there were some red leash swabs, and what did you find with that?
The DNA types from the red leash swabs are consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals, and the buccal swab from James VanCallis cannot be excluded as being a donor to that item. And in that case, I also performed a statistical calculation. And this is a little bit different because it's a mixture. So this is the probability that a random individual from the population would have a profile that could be included in that mixture. So this is not a single source profile from one person, it is a mixture. And in this case, I was able to use 4 of those 16 locations in the calculation. So I obtained data at more than that, but only 4 were suitable to be used in that calculation. And the numbers 1 in 201 for the Caucasian population, 1 in 931 for the African American population, and 1 in 223 for the Hispanic population. The other buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perrell are excluded as being possible donors to that mixture.
All right, then there was a cutting from a black t-shirt, and there was a specific indication of semen suspected
Yes.
on that. And it's a similar parenthetical as to the other one that said saliva.
That's correct.
So this is something that came from Jennifer Summers?
Yes, that's correct.
Or Melinda Jackson, or somebody else who prepped this?
Yes, whoever tested the sample. Yes.
All right. In this case, what results did you find from the cutting of the black t-shirt?
The cutting of the black t-shirt indicates that at least 2 donors are associated with that sample, and the DNA profile obtained from the sperm fraction from the cutting from the black t-shirt matches the DNA profile from the buccal swab from James VanCallis, and the statistical calculation for that is 1 in 4.924 quintillion for the Caucasian population, 1 in 1.532 sextillion for the African American population, and 1 in 123.4 quintillion for the Hispanic population. The deduced additional types from the epithelial fraction are from an unidentified donor, and what that means, epithelial fraction, is simply the portion of that sample that does not, or the DNA that does not come from sperm cells. So when there's a semen stain, as part of the DNA analysis process, we actually split that into 2 separate fractions. One contains DNA from sperm cells, and the other contains DNA from skin cells or non-sperm cells. So the DNA types from the non-sperm fraction was from an unidentified donor, and the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perrell are excluded as being donors to the DNA from that item.
And then the last 2 that we talked about, or actually that are on your report, are the right foot peg motorcycle swab and left foot peg motorcycle swab.
Yes, and no DNA typing results were obtained from either of those items.
Okay. Your next laboratory number we'll talk about is 21. We have a cutting. Actually, I'm not going to name all the items. We'll just do it going through the, we'll go through it. We'll start with the cutting from a cigarette butt.
Okay.
What was your finding?
The DNA type or profile obtained from the cutting from cigarette butt is from an unidentified female, and the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are excluded as being donors to that sample.
Okay. The next one, we already heard some testimony about this, and we haven't about some of the other items so far. But cuttings from swabs of front left nails of dog and cutting from swabs of front right nails of dog as well as a hair root from victim's transport sheet. Were you able to obtain DNA profiles for those items?
No DNA typing results were obtained for those 3 items.
So left front nails of dog, right front nails of dog, and a hair root from the victim's transport sheet.
That's correct.
No
No
DNA.
results.
Victim's tank top cutting.
The DNA types from the victim's tank top cutting match the DNA types from April Millsap. And for that particular sample, the statistical calculation of selecting a random person who would have the DNA types matching the types detected from the tank top cutting is 1 in 33.44 trillion for the Caucasian population, 1 in 648.9 quadrillion for the African American population, and 1 in 230.1 trillion for the Hispanic population. And those numbers are a little different than the previous samples that matched April Millsap's buccal swab because I wasn't able to use all of those 15 locations because one tells me whether it's male or female and the other 15 are used in the statistical estimate. For that particular sample, I was not able to use all 15 locations, so the numbers are slightly different.
Okay. And by the way, that one indicated there was a possible presence of blood.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, and in that sample, the other buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are excluded as donors to that sample.
The victim's shorts cutting, and there was an indication of possible urine. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the cutting of victim's shorts, were you able to develop a profile?
Yes, the DNA types from the cutting of victim shorts with possible urine are consistent with being a mixture of DNA types from April Millsap's buccal swab and an additional donor. However, the limited DNA results from the additional donor are not sufficient for comparison purposes, so no comparisons could be made to that.
So the shorts, there was a mixture,
Yes.
but the minor donor, you could make no comparison because there was insufficient data or
That's
DNA
correct.
profile?
There was very little DNA data generated from the minor donor. The majority of the DNA from that sample was consistent with April Millsap.
The next, which would be the next page now, victim's underwear swab.
Yes. And no DNA foreign to April Millsap's buccal swab was observed from the victim's underwear swabs. So the buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis were excluded as donors to the victim's underwear swabs.
In other words, the only DNA that was found there was
April Millsap's.
Victims, we have several in this one, correct? In number 7?
Number 6 would be cutting a victim's underwear blood.
That was okay. So that was a cutting.
There were 2 samples from the underwear, yes. The victim's
One had
underwear.
blood and one was just indicated a swab.
Yes.
So regarding the blood,
The DNA profile from the victim's underwear swabs or victim's underwear blood sample matches the profile from April Millsap, and that calculation would be the same from my previous report, the 1 in 13.61 quintillion for the Caucasian population, 1 in 313.5 sextillion for the African American population, and 1 in 104.8 quintillion for the Hispanic population. And the other buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are excluded as being donors to that sample.
right, the next one we have actually is one. It's a hair root from victim's left arm.
Yes. In that sample, a partial DNA profile was obtained from the hair root from the victim's left arm, and the DNA types obtained matched the buccal swab from April Millsap, and there were a number of those locations where no DNA types were obtained. This was a partial DNA profile. For the locations where DNA results were obtained and they matched April Millsap's buccal, the probability is 1 in 86 for the Caucasian population, 1 in 626 for the African American population, and 1 in 142 for the Hispanic population. And that was using 2 of those 15 locations to make that calculation.
All right, the next one would be swabs of Raider helmet. And you may have indicated, before we go to the swabs of the Raider helmet, were the other individuals that you've said excluded as possible donors?
Yes, yes. The other 5 buccal swabs were excluded as donors to the hair root from the victim's left arm.
All right. Swabs of Raider helmet?
The DNA types obtained from the swabs of Raider helmet indicate that at least 2 donors are associated with this sample, and the buccal swab from James VanCallis cannot be excluded as being a donor to that sample. And the probability of selecting an individual that could have contributed to that mixture is 1 in 445.6 thousand for the Caucasian population, 1 in 14.22 million for the African American population, and 1 in 2.157 million for the Hispanic population. The other buccal swabs from April Millsap, Alex Schultz, Christopher Lynch, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perro are excluded as being donors to the DNA obtained from the swabs from Raider helmet.
And to be clear, there are going to be some additional swabs of Raider helmet that you talk about, but for this testing that you did, your finding was that James VanCallis cannot be excluded as being a donor.
That's correct.
Okay. Another helmet, swabs of an HJC helmet. Were you able to develop
Yes.
a profile?
The DNA types obtained from the swabs from the HJC helmet, indicate that at least 3 donors are associated with that sample. And again, the buccal swab from James VanCallis cannot be excluded as being a donor to that mixture. And the probability for that is 1 in 355 for the Caucasian population, 1 in 4,303 for the African American population, and 1 in 1,520 for the Hispanic population. And that's using 7 of those 15 locations for that calculation. And the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Austin Albertson, Alex Schultz, and Timothy Perro are excluded as being donors to that sample.
That was the conclusion of that report, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so the next record that you have is record number 32.
Yes.
There was some more testing done, a number again that we're going to go through and explain to the jury what you were able to see and not see. We start with swabs of victims' left shoe.
Yes, a partial DNA profile was obtained from the swabs of the victim's left shoe, and the DNA types matched the DNA from April Millsap's buccal swab. And in that particular case, it was a partial profile, and the statistics for that is 1 in 52.99 thousand for the Caucasian population, and this is at 4 of those locations. 1 in 1.973 million for the African American population, and 1 in 174.1 thousand for the Hispanic population. And there were several locations where comparison to April Millsap was inconclusive because there wasn't enough data, but at the locations where I detected 2 DNA types or they were high enough to make a suitable comparison, they did match April Millsap. And the other buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perro, and James VanCallis are excluded as being donors to that sample.
Okay, and what about swabs of victim's right shoe?
The swabs of the victim's right shoe indicate that 2 or more donors are associated with that sample, at least one of which is male. The major DNA types matched the DNA types from April Millsap's known buccal. And in that case, that estimate is 1 in 13.61 quintillion. For the Caucasian population, 1 in 313.5 sextillion for the African American population, and 1 in 104.8 quintillion for the Hispanic population, so similar to the tank top and the shorts in the previous samples. And on this particular sample, the limited DNA results from the minor donor were insufficient for comparison purposes, so no comparison could be made to the minor DNA types. And the buccal swabs from Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perro, and James VanCallis are excluded as the major donor to that sample.
Now, with regards to that right shoe, you made a finding that one of the donors is male.
Yes. In this particular sample, I did detect a Y chromosome in the DNA profile, so I can say that at least one of the two donors is a male, but there wasn't enough DNA from that additional donor to make any further comparisons.
Did you, in terms of that shoe, the right shoe then, suggest some additional testing be done?
Yes, I did.
And what, we're going to hear about that in a minute, but what did you
Yes.
suggest?
I suggested that we perform YSTR analysis on that sample, and that is the other DNA process that I mentioned previously that looks only at male DNA in a sample, because it can be difficult sometimes when there's a mixture, if there's a large amount of DNA from one contributor and a very small amount of DNA from another contributor. The DNA from the major contributor can often overwhelm a much smaller contribution from a minor donor. So if the victim is female, it's possible for us to attempt YSTR analysis, which would basically ignore any female DNA in the sample and only look at male DNA.
And that would be your colleague who would have done some additional testing.
That's correct.
In addition to that item, do you recall the victim's shorts and tank top swabs also being possibly suitable for testing by your colleague?
Yes, I sent those forward as well for YSTR testing.
Okay. So moving on from the right shoe now, could we move on to cutting of camo pants?
Yes. The DNA profile from the cutting of camo pants matches the DNA profile from James VanCallis buccal swab. And the probability of an unrelated individual having that DNA profile is 1 in 178.8 quadrillion for the Caucasian population, 1 in 13.54 quintillion for the African American population, and 1 in 4.026 quintillion for the Hispanic population. And the other buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perrell are excluded as being donors to that sample.
Then there were some additional swabs from the Raider helmet. Were you able to develop a
Yes.
profile?
The limited DNA types detected from the additional swabs of the Raider helmet indicate that 2 or more donors are associated with that sample, at least one of which is male. And the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perrell are excluded as being donors to that sample. And I could make no conclusive determination regarding the buccal swab from James VanCallis being a potential donor to the DNA types from that additional swabs of the Raider helmet.
Is that because of the limited amount of DNA in the profile you were able to?
Yes, this particular profile was limited, so there's not enough information for me to say one way or another whether the buccal swab from James VanCallis could be a contributor to that mixture.
Then you were asked to see if you could develop a profile on swabs of Meyer hand sanitizer bottle.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes, the DNA types obtained from the Meyer hand sanitizer bottle indicate that at least 2 donors are associated with that sample, and the buccal swab from James VanCallis cannot be excluded as being a donor to that sample. And the probability that a random individual from the population would have DNA types that could contribute to that mixture is 1 in 3.717 thousand for the Caucasian population, 1 in 112.2 thousand for the African American population, and 1 in 7.994 thousand for the Hispanic population. And the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, and Timothy Perrell are excluded as being donors to that mixture.
Then we're going to go through several of them. Swabs of a glass plus bottle, swabs of backpack, swabs of water bottle, swabs of boxer shorts, and additional swabs of boxer shorts, possible wearer ID. Were you able to develop a DNA profile from those?
No DNA typing results were obtained from those items.
And then lastly, on this report, swabs of a Windex vinegar bottle.
Yes, and inconclusive results were obtained from the swabs of the Windex vinegar bottle due to insufficient and/or degraded DNA. Therefore, no comparisons can be made, and that simply means that while I obtained DNA types, it was not enough to make any comparisons to.
Last, record number 37. We have some fingerless gloves and some black exam gloves. Swabs of the outside and inside of those gloves.
That's correct.
Regarding the swabs of fingerless glove outside, were you able to determine a create a profile?
Yes, the DNA types from the outside swabs of the fingerless glove are consistent with the mixture of at least 2 individuals, including a major male contributor. The major donor to the swabs of fingerless glove outside is from an unknown donor, who in my report I refer to as donor 1. The minor donor to this sample is from an unknown donor. The buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are all excluded as being potential donors to this sample.
And then swab of fingerless glove inside?
The DNA profile obtained from the swabs of the fingerless glove inside is consistent with the male contributor, donor 1, so it's the same profile as the major donor from the outside of that glove. And all of the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are excluded as being donors to that sample.
And then regarding swabs of black exam glove outside?
The partial DNA profile obtained from that sample is consistent with the mixture of at least 2 individuals, including at least 1 male. And the buccal swabs from April Millsap, Christopher Lynch, Alex Schultz, Austin Albertson, Timothy Perrell, and James VanCallis are excluded from that sample as well.
Lastly, on your last report, swabs of black exam glove inside.
I obtained a partial DNA profile from the swabs of black exam glove inside that is insufficient for comparison purposes. So there was not enough DNA obtained from that item to make any comparisons to it.
You talked a little bit about where DNA for a person is found. You indicated skin cells.
Yes.
Is DNA found in saliva?
Yes.
Or it can be?
Yes.
Is it always found in saliva?
If there's a sufficient amount of saliva, it should be found, yes.
Okay. What about blood?
Yes.
Obviously, that's semen.
Yes.
I guess those would be epithelial cells, like a hair root, that's actually skin cells, correct?
Yes, yes. We can obtain DNA from a hair root because that would be skin cells that are stuck to the bottom of the hair. We don't get DNA, at least autosomal DNA, from the hair itself. It would be from skin cells that are found in that hair root that's attached to the hair.
Where else would you possibly find DNA in a case?
It's any cell that has a nucleus, but those are the most common sources that we deal with in autosomal DNA analysis. It would be skin cells or body fluids. It can also be found in sweat, but that's through skin cells that are present in sweat.
So there's nothing in particular about sweat, it's actually the skin cells that are sloughed off through the pores?
Yes, and that's the same with saliva. Saliva contains a large amount of skin cells, which is why it's a good source of DNA.
And what about urine?
Urine, there's typically not a lot of skin cells present. We can attempt DNA on that, but for the majority of people, there are not a lot of skin cells found in urine.
The term touch DNA has been used in this case already. Could you explain your understanding of what touch DNA is?
Touch DNA typically refers to low levels of DNA that can be left behind by skin cells by somebody touching an object or coming into contact with that object.
Another, I guess, term or query that we've talked about forensically was Locard's principle or theory of
Yes.
transfer. What is that?
That's a theory that every interaction leaves a trace behind. So if one object contacts another, that there will be a trace left behind of that contact.
To begin with, it is a theory, is that correct?
That's correct.
But to give it its due, it's something that forensic scientists typically adhere to or consider to be a relevant and useful theory.
Yes, it is considered relevant. It's just that even if there is a transfer or a trace, it may not always be detectable by our testing limits. So while I could touch this counter right here, I may not have left enough DNA behind to get a DNA profile from that. So while there could be a trace of my skin cells there, it may not be enough skin cells to get a successful DNA profile from that sample.
So I guess in general terms then, if whether it was a piece of wood in front of you or a piece of clothing, if somebody touches it, are you automatically going to detect or find DNA?
No, it's very dependent on the individual who's touching it, whether there's any DNA present on that item otherwise, the length of contact, the type of surface. So sometimes you can get a DNA profile and sometimes you can't.
One moment, Judge, please. Amongst the items that you tested that you had sent on to your colleague for some additional testing, the right shoe, the tank top, and the, what was the last item?
The shorts, I believe.
Short.
Yes, the victims, let me just refer to my notes, right, or my report. Yes, it was the victim's tank top, the victim's shorts, in addition to the shoe.
And why were those three items, why did you decide to send those on for additional testing?
For the victim's shoe, as I mentioned, I did detect a Y chromosome that indicates a minor male donor to that sample. For the tank top and the shorts, while I didn't detect a Y chromosome, there was an indication that there was a small amount of male DNA present. And I know this because part of the process of DNA analysis, as I mentioned, was we have to determine how much DNA is present in that sample. As part of that step, it also measures approximately how much male DNA could be present. So when I did that step, there was an indication that there was a small amount of male DNA present, even though it was not enough to detect a Y chromosome during my testing.
And then again, regarding the swabs from the two different reports from the Raider helmet, so I don't use incorrect wording, what was your finding, and I'm referring to page 3 of record number 21, swab of Raider helmet. It indicated that these two donors are associated with the sample. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your finding was that James VanCallis cannot be excluded as a donor.
That's correct. Yes.
And the second set of swabs from the Raider helmet indicated no conclusive determination can be made as to whether or not the cells belong to James VanCallis.
As to whether he could be a contributor to that mixture. That's correct. Because when you're sampling different areas on an item, and I don't know what areas were swabbed for these samples, but it could be as simple as swabbing the same area a second time. There may not be as much DNA remaining because the DNA results from that second swab were much more limited than the DNA results from my first analysis of the previous sample. So there's simply not enough DNA from that particular sample to make a conclusive determination regarding his buccal swab being a potential donor to that sample.
Can DNA or evidence of DNA be wiped or cleaned, wiped away?
Yes, it can.
One of the findings, and it may have been the only one that I recall right now at the top of my head, was regarding the Windex vinegar bottle. It indicates insufficient and or degraded DNA.
Yes, and that just means that the DNA either wasn't present in enough quantity or quality, which would indicate degraded DNA. Either way, it wasn't possible to detect a sufficient profile for comparison purposes. There's no way for me to tell whether it was insufficient or degraded. It simply wasn't enough to obtain a comparable profile.
Regarding the hand sanitizer bottle, it was a similar language to the Raider helmet, I think. James VanCallis cannot be excluded as a donor. Is that
That's correct.
And then regarding the Glass Plus bottle, you weren't able to find any.
Yes, no
From the
DNA
swab.
types were obtained from that sample.
That doesn't mean somebody at some point didn't ever handle that bottle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Same with the one with degraded or insufficient. It doesn't mean somebody didn't have their hands on that at some point.
Yes, there just was not enough DNA for me to obtain a profile.
And if one individual is known to have worn, for instance, the Raider helmet, that was their regular helmet, your findings then might be consistent with your explanation that sometimes you do find DNA and enough quantity to make a match. Sometimes you don't.
That's correct.
Sometimes you find a little bit and say, well, he can't be excluded, but I can't call it a match.
It depends on the sample. Typically, when I say can't be excluded, it's because it's a mixture, and it's a mixture where multiple contributors have given approximately the same amount of DNA, so I don't have that major DNA profile to look at. So when that's the case, if I just can say it's a mixture of 2 or 3 people, all I can say is whether someone could have contributed to that mixture, because I don't have a single major profile to look at.
Fair enough. That's all I have. Thank you.
No, we have no questions for this witness. Thank you.
You're excused, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, people call Andrea Halverson Young.
Does anybody need a break? All right, let's take, we'll excuse the jury for 10 minutes.
Okay.
If you don't leave, I have something to put on the record.
All rise for the jury.
Mr. Sheik, I need to make a record about something, don't leave. Please, you can leave in a minute, but let me first make my record. Ma'am, would you come up here, or where'd you go? Right here, please. Ma'am, what is your name?
Julie Ann Kirsten.
I didn't hear you.
Julie Ann Kirsten.
It came to my attention yesterday that you sat in this courtroom and you were taking photographs. Is that true?
That is not true at all.
Deputy,
Not one picture.
you were never in here yesterday?
I was in here. I've been here almost every day.
You didn't use your cell phone to take pictures?
Absolutely not.
What's your name again?
Julie Ann Kirsten. I work for the Armada Police Department.
That's not the same.
Okay, somebody that looks just